Hey folks, in the previous video I removed this beat up old transmission from my BMW, and in this video we're going to install this fresh unit, and hopefully we will also get it up and running and do a test drive. But before we can do any of that, Hurricane Helene came through recently and she left us a big mess. So before we do any of that, we got to do some cleanup. Okay, that's an improvement. And, oh, by the way, since we have these two transmissions here, why don't we do a quick comparison? Because, you know, that's what us guys are all about, comparing things, right? So, the bell housings obviously are going to be about the same size because they bolt to the same engine. But when you move back, this part of the GM transmission, well, it has more length and more girth. Sorry, ZF. Yeah, so I guess that's the gearbox she told you not to worry about. But seriously, now you can see why the GM unit has a higher torque rating than the ZF. Of course, the physical size is not the only determination, but it's a pretty good clue. Considering how much of a pain it was to get this guy out, getting that one in is probably going to be even more fun, considering it's physically larger, so there will be even less room to work around it. But we'll just have to make it work. Okay, so before we can think about installing the transmission, I first want to replace the rear main seal. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail on this, but there are already some excellent videos on this. For example, Shop Life TV has a video that's straight and to the point if you're into that. Also, the 50s Kid has a video that goes into great detail if you're into that. Or you can watch both, whatever works. But I think it's worth saying this is the perfect time to replace the rear main seal because obviously the transmission is out. So, yeah. Wow, that rear main seal is cooked. Now I see why it's leaking. Actually, the rubber in the seal is starting to harden. For example, when you bend it, it doesn't even go back to its original shape. But hey, we've got a new one right here, so that's cool. Oh, by the way, I noticed that the face of the seal is basically flush with the metal lip around it. So when I install the new one, I'm going to do the same thing. Okay folks, removing the rear main seal from the, I guess you call it the seal carrier, or the carrier plate, is actually really easy. Just prop it up on a couple wood blocks or a couple metal blocks, like I did here. Metal. Anyway, and just use a big screwdriver, or a chisel, and rubber mallet to pop it out. Easy peasy. Alright, installing the new seal was actually pretty easy. I took the old one and just set it on top and then used a rubber mallet to carefully tap it into position. And with this one I also made sure that the face of the seal is basically flush with that metal lip. Okay, so all we need to do now is I'm going to lube up the seal a little bit so it goes on the drive shaft easier. I'm going to put some sealant on the bottom and we can install this thing. Oh, and one more thing. These two bolts, the 13mm ones, they go into the crankcase, and as you can see they came stock with sealant on them. When you reinstall these, you need to reapply the sealant to prevent oil leaks, because once again they go into the crankcase, and if these are not sealed properly, the oil can actually seep out through the bolt threads. And I just realized this is basically turning into a rear main seal video. I did not intend that. Okay folks, the new rear main seal is installed. I think next I will install the flex plate, and after that I'll install the transmission cooler lines. They go right through here. So I actually want to install those before I install the transmission, so I've got more room to work. Alright, the transmission cooler lines are installed. That was quite the task. I brought them in through here, and I had to finagle them over the cross member, over the steering rack, through this stuff in here, and here comes an airplane. Okay, so yeah, the lines are installed. Also, once again, I have an aftermarket transmission cooler, so I'm actually going to be cutting this line, probably around here somewhere, so I can attach it to that pipe. Alright, we got the drive plate and the motor plate, whatever that thing is called, installed. And by the way, these bolts, or I should say the bolt holes, go all the way through into the crankcase. So once again, these bolts need to have sealant on them to prevent oil from seeping out past the threads. Okay folks, I think it's time to install the GM gearbox. Oh, and by the way, I went ahead and pre-installed all the mounting bolts, so maybe that will make my life a little bit easier, or maybe they will fall back out and make me say naughty things. I guess we'll find out. But before we do that, I want to tackle the wiring, and that might actually turn out to be pretty easy. Let me show you. Okay, so here we have the two transmission controllers. We have the one for the ZF unit on the top, the one for the GM unit down here. Now, if you look closely, the wiring connectors actually appear to be the same. And the electrical plugs are the same as well, so they physically fit. Also, the controller for the GM unit physically fits where this controller used to be in there. So we can just take this and it'll drop right in. Okay, so far so good. Now here are the three electrical connectors for the transmission controller. This one has all the powers and the grounds, and it looks like all the wires are exactly the same. So this one should just plug right in. Like so. The second one, this is the one that connects to the shifter inside the car, and I think it also connects to the EWS. Once again, all these wires are exactly the same. So this one should plug right in as well. Now this one is where things get a little bit different. Now this connector has the big old cable that used to go down to the transmission. It also has these wires that also went down to the transmission. These used to go down to the gear selector switch. So most of this stuff is going away. But we still have just a few wires here that we need to worry about. So what do we do with these wires? Well, some of them go over to the ECU. I think this one is a chassis ground. So these wires need to be incorporated into the GM wiring harness, which is here. And as you can see, it actually has the same wires. Now, fair warning, they're in different locations in the connector, so you have to keep that in mind. But we should be able to take these wires and de-pin them from this old connector for the ZF and insert them into the connector for the GM. So we should be able to do this whole thing without splicing any wires. We just de-pin a few wires from here, plug them into there, and it should be good. Now I've seen people on the internet talk about cutting and splicing these, but you don't really need to because these connectors are actually very easy to depin. Actually, I'll show you how to do that. First of all, you see there's a terminal block inside the main housing. We've got a little tab right here that we release, and that terminal block comes out. It slides out the side of the housing, just like so. And then you see these little shiny tabs. Those are the release tabs for the wires. So for example, this white wire with the purple stripe, that's one of the wires that has to be transferred over. We just depress the release tab for that little wire and it pulls right out. Now I used a pick, but basically any small pointy object will do the trick. You just want to depress that tab and then you pull the wire straight out. But anyway, once you depress the tab, the wire just pulls out the back. Of course it won't do that on camera because that's the curse of the camera. Okay, here we go. And we're going to remove the corresponding wire from this harness and insert this one into there. Oh, and once again, this connector is the same as the other one, or at least it's the same design. So you do the same thing. You push this little tab up, pull the terminal block out, use a pick to release that wire. Now just remember, the wires are in different locations, so pay attention to that. You want to get the wire back in the correct spot here. Okay, so we have all four of those wires depinned from the ZF wiring harness. We have the black and the yellow twisted together, which is your CAN bus. The white with a purple stripe, which goes to the ECU. And the brown with the black stripe, which goes to the chassis wiring. These guys need to get connected to the GM harness, but now this can go bye-bye. Okay, so here we have our GM connector, and here are three of the wires that we need to replace. I already pulled out the terminal block. Let's start with this one, the white with a purple stripe. It is in pin number 32. So we will remove this, and we will insert this guy into pin number 32. Okay, so that was pretty straightforward. We just need to do the other three wires. We got two of them here. These are pins number 36 and 37. And then that brown wire with a black stripe is actually on our gray terminal block on the GM connector. By the way, that brown wire with the black stripe is pin number 4 on the gray connector. Okay, so there we have it. All four of the wires are repinned into the GM connector. All we got to do is shove these guys back into the housing and it's good to go. So which way does this go again? Oh yeah. Just like that. Okay, so now we can plug this into the controller and this part of the wiring is done. Wasn't so hard, was it? Okay, so to complete the wiring, we just need to do, hello chickens, we just need to do one last thing, and that is to get the wiring out through here. Now it originally was incorporated into this harness and it went through this rubber sleeve. When we removed the ZF wiring, we pulled it out of the sleeve. Now we can't push this back in the sleeve because of that big old connector on the end. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to slice this one side of the grommet, and then I'll sneak the cable through that. Now of course you want to be careful not to cut any wires when you do with this. That would suck. Alright, there we go. Now we'll just take our transmission cable and stuff it in there, and it's all good. No one will be the wiser. And there it is, folks. All we need to do is focus the camera. All we need to do is send the rest of the cable down to the transmission, and the wiring is done. Down the hatch. Okay folks, everything is ready to go. We have the shifter cable, the wiring, Flexplate reinstalled, and the transmission cooler lines. So, you know what time it is.
Get in my belly!
Yeah, what he said. Okay, so off camera I installed my homemade engine hanging fixture. I'm lifting up the front of the engine to tilt it back like that to make it easier to attach the transmission. Also, I put a block of wood under the front of the transmission to angle it up to meet the engine. And here we go. After some finagling and some prying, we got it basically matched right up. Some of these bolts are already started, so all we got to do is finish tightening the bolts, and we're home free. By the way, when I was bolting the transmission to the engine, I had to be careful not to pinch the O2 sensor cables or the transmission cable. Okay guys, we're skipping ahead a little bit, but last night I worked into the night to get the transmission installed. We also got the drive shaft installed. And we got everything hooked up. So, at this point, all we have left is to install that big old heat shield and install the exhaust and put fluid in the transmission. Okay, the heat shield is installed. And it looks a lot nicer when it's clean. Who would have thought? Okay, now it's time for the most exhausting part of the project. The exhaust. Okay, the exhaust is installed, and actually I had to replace those bolts. I don't know if it's the heat cycling or what, but the bolts get soft and they eventually break. By the way, I also buttoned up everything on top. But man, this car's been sitting too long. It's collecting dust. So after we get this all done, we're going to have to give her a wash. Okay folks, it's time to put fluid in the transmission, and to do that I'm going to use the Pumpinator 5000. It's a modified garden sprayer. And also, we're going to use Castrol Transmax. Now, they're not a sponsor, but the 50s kid used this in his car, and he had good results. Oh, by the way, if you're curious what transmission fluid you can use in your E46, I'll put a link down below to a list of approved transmission fluids. Okay folks, we pumped her full of fluid, but we're not done yet. Next we need to start up the engine to circulate the fluid through the system, and then we need to top it off again. Okay, here we go. I don't know about you, but on the first start of a new build or a big upgrade, I always get nervous. I get the butterflies in my stomach. So, let's see what happens. Oh, we got the gear icon, probably because it still needs coating. Let's see if it'll start. Hey! Okay, I can live with that. Awesome. Alright, let's finish filling up the transmission fluid, and then we'll do the coating. Okay, folks, she is full. Time to button her up. Okay, so I was reading an old forum post where another guy did the ZF to GM automatic swap, and he had a similar issue with the warning light not going off. And he said the way to fix that was actually kind of weird. He had to take the black and the yellow wires, which are the two CAN bus wires, on this connector, and they had to swap places. Because apparently the MS43 ECU actually has these wires in the opposite place of the other ECUs. So the black needs to go where the yellow is and vice versa. Let's try that. Okay, so the black and the yellow wires for the CAN bus swapped places. Let's see if that helps. Well, that's a good start. On the dash it says it's in park instead of a warning light. Nice! Thank you, old forum post guy. Hey, since we have the car up on jack stands, let's run it through the gears and make sure it actually works. Alright, let's put it in park. Oh wait, it's already in park. Duh. Let's put it in reverse. It says R, that's nice. Alright, let's try drive. Nice. And the traction control's unhappy because the rear wheels are spinning but the fronts are not. Whatever. Hey, let's put it in manual mode. Yeah. And let's try to shift gears. Hey! Nice. Very nice. Okay, I'm a happy camper. Okay, I would love to drive the car right now, but unfortunately the steering rack has developed a pretty serious leak. And unfortunately I don't really feel safe driving the car with it leaking that much power steering fluid. So while it's up in the air, we're going to rebuild the steering rack. Can you guess what the next video is going to be? In any case, we got the transmission installed, we got it running, and we know it shifts gears. So it's basically good to go. Alright guys, see you next time.